Denny Hamlin just dropped a serious claim about NASCAR, and it all started with something that sounds simple: brake pads. But what happened inside the NASCAR hauler before the Iowa Corn 350 turned into a much bigger argument over safety, rules, and whether NASCAR was willing to create a penalty that wasn't actually written into the rulebook. Hamlin says he was dealing with a potentially dangerous brake problem, offered to accept a major penalty just to fix it, and still claims NASCAR told him that refusing to race could result in an even worse penalty. And what makes this story even crazier is what happened after Hamlin finally got on the track. So stay with me until the end, because the full story explains what was wrong with Hamlin's car, why NASCAR refused to let him change the pads, what happened inside that heated meeting, and how he still drove that car to a top 5 finish. Welcome back to NASCAR Nation News. The problem started with Hamlin's decision to change things around for Iowa. Hamlin has not had the kind of success at Iowa Speedway that he wanted, so he decided to lean on a setup that had worked well for 2311 racing. According to Hamlin, that setup had already been used across roughly 20 races or more by different cars. This was not some secret experimental package. Hamlin simply wanted something proven at a track where he had struggled. But once he got on the track, he quickly realized the combination was not working for him. And the biggest problem turned out to be the brakes. Hamlin and his team believed they were dealing with a bad batch of brake pads. The rest of the braking system was the same as what other teams were using, but Hamlin's brake pressure was becoming extremely inconsistent. After a caution, when everything had cooled down, the brakes could feel normal. But during green flag runs, Hamlin said the brake pressure could drop dramatically, at one point effectively down to around 10%. At Iowa, where drivers are braking hard and carrying serious speed into the corners, that becomes a major safety concern. And this is where NASCAR's rule became the center of the controversy. NASCAR allows teams to change certain braking components when there is a safety concern, but brake pads are different. Under the rules Hamlin was dealing with, his team could not simply replace those brake pads before the race, even if they were willing to accept a penalty. That left Hamlin in a difficult position. He understood NASCAR's argument. NASCAR does not want teams showing up with one brake pad for qualifying and another for the race. If teams could freely make that switch, it could become another way to gain a competitive advantage. But Hamlin believed this situation was different, and that is where the meeting inside the NASCAR hauler became heated. Hamlin said he went to NASCAR and made his case. If NASCAR believed changing the pads violated the rules, he was willing to take the hit and start from pit lane. He wasn't asking to gain a performance advantage. He wanted permission to replace the pads so he could put the car on the track without worrying about a potential brake failure. Hamlin's argument was basically this: punish me if you have to, but give me a safe way to race. He said the concern was preventing the car from potentially blowing a rotor or entering a corner with insufficient braking and going straight into the wall. Hamlin even said he wished the rule had an exception for common sense in situations like this. But NASCAR still did not give him the option he wanted, and then came the part that created the biggest controversy. Hamlin said he told NASCAR that he simply would not put the car on the track with those brake pads if he believed they were unsafe. According to Hamlin, NASCAR responded by telling him that if he refused to race, they could make up a penalty that would be worse than the penalty he would receive for coming down pit road and changing the pads under green. That statement changed this from a brake story into a NASCAR controversy. Hamlin's reaction was basically that if that's the situation, he would just have to slow down. He said that if he lost the brakes, he would put around the racetrack and accept however many laps he lost. This distinction is important. Hamlin is not saying NASCAR actually handed him an invented penalty. He is saying NASCAR told him one could be created if he refused to get into the car. And that brings the focus back to the safety question. Hamlin had already offered to accept a penalty, even a severe one, if it gave him an avenue to replace the pads safely. NASCAR's position was about maintaining a rule that applies consistently to every team. Hamlin's position was that exceptional safety circumstances should allow NASCAR to use some common sense. And somehow, after all of that, Hamlin still had to race. The team tried another solution before the start, changing the air cooling ducts in the number 11 Toyota. Crew chief Chris Gale viewed that as something of a 50-50 solution, and it ultimately did not completely solve the problem, so Hamlin had to climb into the car and manage the situation. That meant Hamlin had to adjust his driving around a problem he could not completely eliminate. Every restart brought another test, because the brakes could feel different once the car heated back up. Instead of pushing the car to its limit, Hamlin had to balance speed with the risk of losing braking performance. Despite the brake issues, Hamlin finished 5th at Iowa. Chase Briscoe also fought through his own brake-related problems and finished 6th, showing that this was not an easy weekend for the Toyota camp. But Hamlin's result made the entire situation even more remarkable. He went into the race believing the car had a serious braking limitation, could not get the pre-race pad change he wanted, had a heated discussion with NASCAR, and still came away with a top 5 finish. At the same time, Hamlin did not completely shift the blame onto NASCAR or his team. He took responsibility for the original setup decision, admitting that he was the one who wanted to lean on another team's proven Iowa setup because he had struggled to find the right feel at the track. But once the brake problem appeared, he believed the rules left him with very few options. And that may be the biggest issue NASCAR now has to consider. This story is not simply about Denny Hamlin being angry after a race. It raises a legitimate question about what happens when a standardized equipment rule meets an unexpected safety problem. If a team makes the wrong choice, should the only option be to continue with it? Or should there be a clearly defined penalty that allows the team to correct the problem before the race without creating an unfair advantage? Hamlin has already made his position clear. Denny Hamlin finished 5th. Ty Gibbs won the race. But the biggest conversation coming out of Iowa may not be about the winner at all. It may be about the moment when one of NASCAR's most experienced drivers looked at his brakes, told NASCAR he did not want to risk going into a wall, and claims he was told that refusing to race could bring an even harsher penalty. That is a story NASCAR will have to answer carefully, because when the debate moves from performance to safety, every word matters. This is NASCAR Nation News. If you want the latest NASCAR controversies, driver reactions, race updates, and the stories happening behind the scenes, make sure you subscribe. And now the question is simple. Do you think NASCAR should have allowed Hamlin to change the brake pads with a penalty? Or was NASCAR right to enforce the rule exactly as written?